Well, good morning from Boise, Idaho. I'm really excited to have Ms. Mandy Walls here in Boise with us today for Site Reliability Chats on May 4th.
May the 4th be with you, Julie.
May the 4th be with you, Mandy. Tell us why you're in Boise, Mandy.
So Julie talked me into coming to DevOps Days Boise, which was yesterday. And we're here this morning to talk to all of you.
Absolutely. And we are hanging out in the hotel lobby where Mandy is staying. So there may be some background noise, but thank you all for being here with us. So as you know, I am Julie Gunderson, Site Reliability Advocate at Gremlin, and Mandy.
I am Mandy Walls, DevOps Advocate at PagerDuty.
Yes, and we still do a lot of things together today. Jason Yee is not with us this morning because he wanted us to get to hang out and do our stream. So today we've got some exciting stuff to talk about. Normally we talk about big incidents or outages, but today we are going to be focused on one thing primarily, which is the post-incident review of the Atlassian outage.
Yeah, so this came out, Monday?
Yeah. And it's actually really interesting. And I do have a link that I am happy to post in the chat so that folks can read this more in depth. But Mandy, while I get that link, you want to kind of kick us off with maybe a little bit of a recap?
Yeah, so if you're alive and do technical things, right, then Atlassian, they had it started April 5th?
Yes.
Right? And lasted until the 18th, until all their customers were recovered. So that's a pretty significant
time frame
for any kind of outage, really, but for something that is so crucial to workflow, in particular, like the Atlassian products, like it had a lot of impact on people. So
it did. So just to kind of recap what happened on April 5th, Atlassian they intended to delete an instance of Insight Asset Management, which was a standalone legacy app. That was their intention, was just to delete the instances of the standalone app. But what happened was, Mandy,
they took the wrong IDs to the database and deleted the actual parent cloud accounts rather than this legacy component that they were trying to get rid of.
And so one of the things that if you were watching any of the other streams, especially when Jason Yee and I were talking, we talked a lot about these 400 customers that Atlassian kept saying were impacted. So 400 customers. And Jason and I would argue about the fact that I said 400 customers is still a big deal because those customers have customers. And Jason, was talking about the fact that when you have 20,000 customers, 400 isn't that big of a deal. And there's some validity to that. However, Atlassian has updated that number in the final post-incident review, and now that is 775 customers that were impacted. So on April 5th, 775 customers were impacted by their whole accounts being deleted.
Yes.
On April 8th, they restored the first set of customers, and on April 18th, the rest of the customers were restored. On April 29th, this post-incident review was published. And this is a very, very in-depth post-incident review.
Yes.
So right here, you can see that we do have an update of the timeline. And we've got two images here that we'll show you through this live stream. So this is the timeline of the incident. And then we're also going to talk about their incident communications, because there was an opportunity that they identified in the post-incident review, as well as customers publicly identified on Twitter.
Yes.
Yes. So there's a couple of interesting things when we look at the communication and when they communicated with the customers that we'll get to. But right off the bat, some of the interesting things with the post-incident review was I actually kind of found it interesting that 99.9% is their uptime goal. Yes. So Mandy and I give a talk called Reducing Trauma in Production with SLOs and Chaos Engineering.
Yes.
And one of the things that we talk about is the concept, they bring this up in the Google Site Reliability Engineering book as well, of extreme reliability, so like 5 nines of reliability. And so I kind of do appreciate the fact that Atlassian is
at 3.
Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable thing for that kind of SaaS cloud provider, given the complex nature of the suite of products that they're offering. Like there's a lot going on they're doing regular feature development. Like you're taking a bit of risk going all of that. So like I think it's like 3 nines seems maybe even aggressive there, but like at the same time it is a productivity tool and they are global. So yeah.
So now one of the things that Mandy and I thought was a little bit interesting too in this review is that they were talking about RTO or recovery time objective and RPO.
Yes.
So recovery point objective. And so one of the things that Atlassian said is that they missed their recovery time objective.
Yes.
So, 2 weeks of an incident. That's a miss.
That's probably a miss given they don't really call out what the actual objective was, but 2 weeks seems particularly awful regardless.
It does. But they met their RPO.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that we saw in all of the reports during this incident, after this incident, in the post-incident review and all of that, is they kept saying, oh, customers only lost 5 minutes of data.
5 minutes of data.
Yeah, so the accounts were deleted, they were restored, they lost 5 minutes of data. That sounds great, Mandy.
Yeah, except that like you're down for 2 weeks, so like you've lost your entire workflow for that entire period. So like from a continuity standpoint, like what are you doing in the meantime? Are you using paper tickets? Are you migrating to another tool? Like what is your then backup program for when your SaaS product that you subscribe to goes offline for 10 days, 2 weeks? Is everything halted? Are you no longer fulfilling Jira tickets? Like what happens to everybody else? So like while it's good to say like the historical data was the only loss of 5 minute period, like you lost 2 weeks of productivity on top of that. I'm like, that's some hand wavy mishmash language.
It is, but I think that it's something good that we should be considering now, because I think a lot of organizations may not have considered an outage like this as something that they should prepare for. And even for all the rest of those not 775 customers that were impacted, they should still be looking at this and thinking, what can we learn from this?
Yeah.
How can we prepare for an incident like this? Because as we all depend on other tools to make sure that our tools work.
Yeah.
Where are those dependencies? And we talk a lot about that with chaos engineering. We talked a lot about that during my time at PagerDuty as well, is understanding those dependencies and understanding how to work around those. There was kind of a big thing that happened though during this incident, and I'll show you that on this slide. We're gonna all say hi to the amazing gentleman here at the hotel who looked at us because he dropped something, which we don't care. They're lovely. They've been great. Made us some great coffee this morning. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we'll just do a little plug. We're staying at, I live here.
Yeah.
So I'm not actually staying here.
I'm at the Modern Hotel in downtown Boise. So yeah.
That's a pretty cool hotel. Huh?
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah. So now back to, this is the incident communication timeline.
Yes.
Now, this is where things get
Weird.
They really do. I was going to say spicy. I don't know why spicy, but well, I think some people got spicy.
I think maybe.
All right. So here's the situation. First of all, I'm just going to do a quick timeline of one of the things that we saw, and I did write it down on some notes. Okay. April 5th, Atlassian found the incident.
Yes.
Okay. So that's when the support team got it, responded to it. They didn't address this major outage on Twitter until April 7th.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty big gap. And
That's
we're going
a couple days, Julie.
It is a couple days. And come on, everybody knows we use Twitter or what now, Mastodon? Who knows what? But irrelevant to this conversation. But I'm going to come back to why this April 7th date is really important in a minute. And then April 12th was the first update we got from the CTO.
Yeah.
So the reason that not addressing this publicly on Twitter for 2 days goes back to the fact that, well, Mandy, could they talk to all of their customers?
They could not,
What?
because once they deleted the accounts by accident, they didn't know you were a customer anymore. So the folks that were impacted by this had no recourse for actually connecting into the regular support ticket flow, because that requires your Atlassian login, and your Atlassian login is no longer associated with an account, and all of that has fallen apart. So they had no idea what was going on there.
Yeah, so that's a little problematic there. And this is one of the things that they have identified as an area of improvement. And so they did actually put why they didn't respond publicly sooner. So let's unpack this statement. So we prioritize communicating early with affected customers via status page, email, support tickets, and one-on-one interactions. Oh, that's great. Isn't it great?
Yeah, okay.
However, we were unable to reach many customers because we lost their contact information when their sites were deleted. Yeah.
And you can think about like if you're a user of this and you're the end user, like you're harassing your IT team or whoever manages your vendor relationship with Atlassian, because you don't have a person to company relationship with Atlassian. So like they're really doing is outsourcing all of that support stress to all of the folks that work at all of their customers.
I know. And that's why, going back to just the 2 days, the 2 days on Twitter, when you are in a situation where you cannot even identify actually all of the customers that are impacted, because that's one of the 3 learnings for the support teams, was to be able to validate or get a reliable list of validated customer contacts.
So they were like rebuilding all of that. You can imagine them trying to rebuild it from like CRM or other ticketing systems or wherever else they might have communications buried for these particular accounts. And that's only to recreate like the admins and the systems contacts folks for any of these given customers, not everyone else who might be calling in case those folks are on vacation or have changed jobs or whatever else might happen. So
now, to be fair, they've identified this as a big area of improvement. So one of the things I just want to pause as we talk through this, way to go, Atlassian, for being so honest and transparent, since that's one of your goals with your communication in this post-incident review. They've done a great job of taking this major incident and turning it not just into learnings, but action items. So they have actions associated with this, which is improving the backup of key contacts. So they're talking about, quote, backup authorized account contact information outside of the product instance. They're looking at retrofitting support tooling so that they can create mechanisms for customers without a valid site URL or Atlassian ID to make direct contact with our technical support team. And honestly, I don't even know if that's something you would ever really think of. Would you ever really think of a point where a customer without an ID or a way to identify that they're a customer would need to reach you? Because again, that normally doesn't happen unless you accidentally delete all the customer accounts.
Yeah, I think that was a tough one. But I figure if someone on the customer side has accidentally done a deletion, like there has to be, you'd think there's some mechanism there. Maybe certainly not to the scale of what they're seeing with this particular instance, but it's weird to me that like all of that is there and like they're not from a business standpoint, like, okay, you're going to delete this account and then you're going to wipe the whole thing. And like, it's weird to me because like, number one, this is probably one very large database with some very complex schema, but at the same time, like part of your sales cycle is to hope that those people come back. And like, wouldn't it be nice if customer leaves, has some buyer's regret of the new thing that they've purchased and comes back and like, hey, we're going to set up your thing and it's all still here. But like, well, not part of the plan for these, which seems a little strange.
A little unfortunate. And we're gonna talk a little bit about now their incident response process. Okay. And we're gonna talk about that, and then we're gonna talk about some of the action items that they found in that.
Mm-hmm.
So so this is a toughie. Let's put up this image again, Mandy, so folks can see it. I'm gonna try to make it a little bit bigger so that you can see this as we talk about it. But so we're talking about what they said, an up to 14-day incident. Mm-hmm. They did a great job of talking about cross-functional teams and all the folks that they got involved with their incident response process. So,
and from that standpoint, like you could definitely tell to their credit that this was definitely an all hands on deck
all hands
kind of thing. So like they do talk about pulling in the customer facing teams to help rebuild stuff. The customer support folks are there to help validate when the accounts are restored, and like that kind of, so it's not just up to engineering to take on the whole load of what's going on here.
Yeah, and that was amazing. So just on the length of the incident itself. So one of the things that they said is they had the global incident response team running 24/7. So the incident, management team was running 24/7. The global incident response team met every 3 hours to get workflow and status updates. And I'm kind of curious, was that like on a 24-hour clock? Were they literally meeting every 3 hours? But they did call this as a major incident within, I think, the first hour of identifying what had happened. They bring the team together, but they also learned a lot through the process of this, because this was a very, very complex incident, and it involved multiple teams. And so, they've said that it stemmed from two things, which is a communication gap, which makes me giggle because I don't consider it a communication gap, but it was a communication gap between the team that requested the deletion and the team that ran it. So instead of providing the IDs of the intended app to be marked for deletion, the team that provided the IDs of the cloud site.
Yeah, and like for it to be like a communications, giving them the benefit of the doubt on that, saying that the team that was requesting the deletion, which is probably some kind of product team, to say, hey, please
deprecate this,
delete this, this no longer supported thing. Instead of giving them the ID of that actual app, they were assuming that the team doing the deletion would like maybe go into the accounts and look for the app ID. Maybe that's what counts as a communications ID or a communications breakdown, rather than just giving them the ID of the app to delete across the database.
Yeah. And then they also said the second thing. So the two things that, was that they're insufficient system warnings. So what they say is the API used to perform the deletion accepts both site and app identifiers and assumes the impact is correct.
Oh.
So here's the thing. One of the things that they've implemented to make sure that this doesn't happen again is soft deletes.
Yes.
Talk to us, Mandy.
Yeah, so soft delete, right, is really the process of, instead of going into the database and wiping out the line, like delete from table, blah, 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 you go into the database and update some kind of status to be like sunset or deleted or hold for billing or like some other kind of soft process that's going to have a workflow. And you would have like that status update and some kind of timestamp that then you can then sunset across. This sits in this state for maybe 30 days, and then it goes to the next state so that you're not immediately deleting things across the entire database.
And so as they were going through this incident, they were also creating all sorts of new documentation, which is one thing that they've absolutely taken out of this, is to have documentation and an actual run book. Maybe we should call it on how to handle something like this in the future. Now, I was talking to Mandy that I was being a little snarky because I did used to work at PagerDuty, and Atlassian did buy OpsGenie. And so to see that one of the biggest struggles was their incident management process was a little bit like painful in my heart. But one of the things that we have to remember as organizations is that we're always working to get better. And no matter how hard we plan, how hard we try, how hard we, work towards finding those areas where we might have gaps in reliability, shit happens.
Well, it does. And like to their credit, like you have to have some reasonable limit on your planning. And like I talked about this on our podcast, Pages to the Limit, with Rich Lafferty at the end of last year. Like, what is the horizon for your disaster recovery planning or your like imaginary scenario planning? And obviously for their scenario planning in this case, it was not, we're going to delete hundreds of customers by accident. Like, so you have like some kind of end point where you stop your catastrophe planning. And it's hard to pick that. Like, it's hard to see like where that horizon actually is for all of these. And I totally understand it from that standpoint. So when they get into some of this, future documentation and the docs they wrote on the fly and some of this other crazy business, like you can sort of see some of that, but like at the same time, some of this seems like a big blind spot for like being able to actually walk through the database and do some of this work.
It does.
Especially since Jira used to be at least partially on premises as an offering, and a lot of their customers would run their own systems, and then they've been pushing folks into this SaaS platform, which, to be honest, I would never wish running Jira on anyone. But like, it feels like maybe they don't have a full 360 view of good SaaS processes yet.
Yeah, and that aside too, like there is just some basics. They implemented a code freeze across all of engineering on April 8th.
On April 8th. So three days.
3 days into this major customer impacting, super complicated incident.
When did they declare the major incident?
April 5th.
So they left the major incident run for 3 days before
they implemented a code freeze.
Whoa.
Yeah. Like that's a long time. And so they say this allowed us to focus on customer restoration and eliminate the risk of change causing inconsistencies in customer data, minimize the risk of other outages, and reduce the likelihood of unrelated changes distracting the team from recovery. Awesome. Absolutely implement a code freeze.
Which should have been part of the major incident declaration on this.
100%. And if that isn't part of your major incident declaration, get it in there now, okay? Because when you're in the middle, I mean, one of the things that we have health checks at Gremlin, so you can actually check the statuses before you're running chaos engineering experiments, because you don't want to introduce anything into something where there's a major incident going on. So 3 days is a big opportunity for learning there.
Yeah.
And so that's just one thing in the timeline of the incident that they really need. And I can't see if that's actually in the picture because I need glasses and my computer screen's too far away since Mandy and I are hanging out here with this awesome artwork behind us. So that's a pretty big deal with the incident response process. So they couldn't talk to customers. They waited for a long time to implement the code freeze. They had multiple teams working on this together. And this incredibly complex incident. And as I said, they did learn from it. One of the interesting things that they did, though, Mandy, is they pulled in over 450 support engineers to run validation checks.
Yeah, this was interesting to me because of the way that Atlassian products are hooked together. The IDs, the core IDs of these products in the database are immutable. So once they've deleted you out of their database, they are effectively recreating the scaffolding of your account and then restoring your data. But then they have to make sure that all the links between your app IDs still work. So if your account has Jira and Trello and Confluence and whatever else, they've changed all the IDs in the database by rebuilding your scaffolding, and then they have to check everything. So they're calling in their support team, it sounds like, to make sure all of those things still hang together and aren't just dying when you're clicking things.
Yeah. And so now the second part of why we just got through number one, why we didn't publicly respond sooner. There's a whole nother part.
Yeah, there you go.
So, and hold on. It looks like we've got
guest.
a guest joining us now. Please welcome here. Which way do you want to get in on this?
I'm going to slide in on the side here.
Kareem, hey. So Kareem is also here in Boise. Why are you here, Kareem?
I heard there's good coffee.
Here, Mandy, scooch in a little bit. Let's just hug up on this bench here. So, Kareem, tell our viewers who you are and then why you're here with us today.
I'm here today because we organized DevOps Days Boise yesterday, which was refreshing to see so many people in real life.
In real life, there were a lot of hugs.
There were a lot of hugs, very few webcams to talk to.
Where are you from?
I'm from Amsterdam. So for me, this was a little bit of a hook, but definitely worth it. If you ever get a chance, visit Boise. Beautiful city, awesome weather. Also, 4 seasons in a day.
Literally, that did happen. That was the thing. Why don't you do a quick, who are you?
Who am I? Senior developer advocate at HashiCorp. We're focused on the infrastructure line of products. So Terraform, Packer, Vagrant, but If you have any other questions, hit me up. I'm at Casey Tierley on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else. Not cool enough to get a lower third, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I can't reach the keyboard. It's too far away to type.
It is too
Oh,
far.
yeah.
What do you
Remember
do?
when we had production companies that would do this for us?
Yeah, we're again high tech stuff. We're squished together on a bench. Okay, so Kareem, we're talking about this whole stream has been all about the Atlassian post incident review,
Yeah.
and we are currently on
That's
point
awful.
number 2. I know it is on why we didn't publicly respond sooner. Which okay, so what do they say? We immediately knew what caused the incident. The architectural complexity and unique circumstances slow down our ability to quickly scope and accurately estimate. So Mandy and I just went on a little bit of a rant that it took them 3 days to do a code freeze.
It's rough. Yeah, I mean, it's always easier to look back and think, we could have done this differently, we could have done that better. But if there's one thing we know, relationships fall through bad communication, right? Like they fail through bad communication. And as a company that wants people to move to your cloud product, you need to be super forthcoming. It's hard, right? Like it's hard to admit failure. It's hard to say, oh, sorry, we deleted your data, or we may have deleted your data, and we have no idea what's happening. But that's how you gather, people in your corner. That's how you make sure they trust you in the future. Because to me, I'd freak out if my data was gone, or not necessarily
It was
gone.
only
just-
gone for 5 minutes.
It was.
Sorry, Mandy and I. That was so
She's trolling you.
they talked about how they missed their recovery point objective, but they hit their recovery time objective.
No, other way around. They hit the time and
Missed
they missed the time and hit the point.
Yeah. Regardless of the time, 5 minutes of data, but 2 weeks of lost productivity.
The productivity loss across companies is just going to be huge. And
Yeah.
I don't think anyone has a hard time having compassion for this. To me, if you work on complex systems, you understand that it is never beautiful. It looks great on a conference talk. It constantly fails. And running complex systems is hard.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be forthcoming when things go wrong.
Yeah, you do. And I think that, and this post-incident review, they did a good job. They did, I think, actually
It's well written.
well-written, excellent job on identifying areas of gaps
Yes.
and ways to learn from this. And so we were just talking.
This got run through some crisis marketing.
Oh, it really did, and yet it wasn't too markety.
It's not too bad, but like there's definitely some points where they're like calling back to what the product's actually going to do, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah, well-
it's really necessary in here, but
Well, yeah,
That's
after
what
that
it
it was, but
okay.
they did a good job also of keeping it blameless. I really
Yes.
do feel like they really did not point.
Well, because like there's multiple failures across the entire workflow for this,
Yeah.
so like no one really is to blame. And like I mentioned earlier, like you only have so much capacity for the planning that you're going to do, so you have to like declare the end of planning somewhere.
Yeah, and so on the actions, so we've already talked about they improve the backup of key contacts, retrofitting support tooling, customer escalation system and processes. So they're investing in a unified account-based escalation system and workflows that allow for multiple work objects. They're talking about expediting 24/7 escalation management and coverage,
Very nice.
which is great. So one thing I wanted to kind of just bring back on that. So when Mandy and I would talk a lot about incident response at my time at PagerDuty, and one of the things we would talk about is having a way to make sure that you're also rotating out those incident commanders. And we would talk about incidents that were like maybe
People get tired, and when you're tired,
Yeah.
you make
Yeah,
mistakes.
exactly.
You don't want to be making mistakes when you're recovering from mistakes.
Yeah, and especially as the incident commander that's there to kind of keep everybody cool, calm, and collected. We would talk about incidents that were, like 5 hours or a day.
you know.
So not a 14-day, 13-day
No.
incident. So do make sure that that's one of the things that you want to think about is do you have a way to make sure that those folks have a break? Because like when you're on call for incident response, what's your on-call schedule?
Our on-call schedule right now is like 48 hours every 2.5 weeks.
But if you were the incident commander for 48 hours,
Right.
this-
We are not expected to be on a call then for 48 hours. Even should that happen, like you rotate in and out. Like you tap in another player after a few hours. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, and so they do say that they want to allow for consistent
Yeah.
24/7 coverage.
And they have the benefit, like Atlassian is pretty global. Like they do have offices worldwide. So I can see them hiring on additional or training up additional folks to be part of this sort of more robust global response planning
Definitely
process.
something worth doing.
Yeah, so that they have somebody who can be maybe a site leader across every region where they have folks, or somehow, putting something a little bit more regimented into place after something like this.
The thing you could be doing is read through this whole document and then use it to identify gaps that you might have. It's easy to read these documents and go like, man, they messed up. It's much harder to read through these documents and go like, hey, you know what? How does our DR plan look like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, we don't have a plan? All right, maybe we don't want to end up having these same learnings publicly. Maybe we want to have them internally. Start working on these.
And that's why we appreciate you so much, Atlassian folks, for posting this very in-depth document. I mean, we're talking architecture reviews, support
Pictures.
teams reviews, so many pictures, lots and lots of pictures.
Yes.
So thank you for putting something like this together so that we can all learn from it and make sure that we don't have to learn from it in the real world.
You don't have to learn from scratch.
Right.
There-
Yeah.
There's a
Yes.
blueprint that you can use.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that, it is very important to remember again that today is May the 4th. So that
This is very
said,
important.
it is incredibly important.
That's Picard, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh.
I almost picked a Lego May the 4th just for you, but I couldn't find a non-copyrighted one this morning. Yeah. So with that, everybody, thank you for joining us on Site Reliability Chats for May the 4th.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming all the way in for Amsterdam just to sit next to Mandy
Yeah,
and I
right?
for
Yeah.
for this. And Mandy, thank you for coming from New Jersey.
Yes, you're welcome.
Little plug for DevOps Days Boise. We will have the videos posted on YouTube in just a couple of weeks. But with that, enjoy your Wednesday, your May the 4th, and reading this post-incident review, which again, the links are in the comment section. And have a great day.